You're live. Hey, everybody. How's it going? I hope you're okay. I can't hear you right now, but I can never hear you, so it's fine. John is here with the roll call. Let's read them out. Frank, Webb, Hank, of course, John, Matthew, Donna, Roger, Chuck, Bill, Paul, Eugene, Andrew, and there we go. Hey, there's Paul. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it, by the way. My hair was particularly bad in July in that I let it grow. I got your message. I haven't responded. Somebody else sent me a message too, and I apologize. Somebody sent me a long private message on Twitter. I hope you're here and I hope you can hear this, although I don't think you are. Anyway, I haven't responded to it yet. It was practically a letter, and so I want to write practically a letter back, but I haven't yet. So anyway, here we all are. Why don't we do a show? Am I recording? I am recording. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Okay. Yeah, we'll do that. Financial analysts are back to work. It is Tuesday, the 5th of January, 2021, and this is macOS Can Live. I say they're back to work. Some of them were working over the holidays. Some of them issued notes on New Year's Eve when they should have been out playing or, inside thinking about the years they got to go out and play. Hi, everybody. It's Ken Ray. Welcoming you to another edition of macOS Can Live, this thing that we do Monday through Friday, now that the holidays are over, 3:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, other times, other places. And we get together, we chat about some Apple stuff, and hopefully it's fun. Second half of the show, we will talk about the greening of Apple's executive bonuses, their payout. Basically, it's not just greening. It's kind of interesting. Well, we'll get to it in the second half of the show. I say greening, and then I will argue for why it's not just greening, being more environmentally sound, whatever. That's the second half of the show. First half of the show, though, it looks like analysts will drag investors kicking and screaming past iPhone sales. That seemed to be the theme of two of the three notes that we'll concentrate on today. And I say concentrate on, we'll go over them briefly. Starting with Canaccord Genuity analyst T. Michael Walkley, who raised his price target on Apple shares on Tuesday. Now, what's interesting is in his note, he says, because of demand for iPhone 12, we are raising our price target on Apple shares. Had been $145, it's now $150. And of course, he has a positive rating by overweight. I don't know. We'll get to it when we get to the bottom of the page. Basically, his argument is that Apple is continuing to demonstrate the strength of its product ecosystem, and we anticipate ongoing strong double-digit growth for Macs, iPads, and services. It's interesting. He thinks that the December quarter iPhone sales could reach double-digit growth despite we were into October before we got the first two iPhones. We were halfway through November before we got the second two iPhone 12s. Comparing that to the year before when you had a full quarter of all of the iPhone 11 line available, he still thinks they're going to hit double-digit growth versus that time last year. Okay, that's really cool. What's interesting is he's also anticipating double-digit growth for all the other hardware that Apple has to offer. So the Mac and the iPad and all of it, which is kind of interesting because on the last earnings call, it's not like Apple CFO Luca Maestri or CEO Tim Cook said, yeah, we're done with those because we're through the back-to-school cycle. But they were through the back-to-school cycle. The big catalyst for growth in those devices, you would think, would already be done. Except, of course, then in the fourth quarter, I believe it was, we had the M1 Max come out and, we had the holidays. And so people were buying the new iPads. In fact, the new iPad Air came out in the fourth quarter as well. So despite the, businessy business reasons or the education reasons for upgrading those things, there were still new things coming out. And he thinks that's going to be enough to have pushed it to double-digit growth. 5G continues to be a winner in his estimation. It will be bigger as more people have 5G coverage and as that 5G coverage improves. not just in, the area it covers, but in people's ability to use it, I guess, or in its ability. He thinks it's going to improve both because of the amount that it covers and just the service itself, similar to what Loop Ventures analyst Gene Munster had said. He wraps up his note saying, with the 5G upgrade cycle likely a benefit during 2021, other hardware categories growing double digits, and continued mix shift towards high margin services, we believe the share price is compelling for longer term investors. He's got a buy rating, as I said, and he's got a price target now of $150 up from $145. Now, we talk a lot about headlines. I fell into a trap on a headline today. Apple's Mac release schedule and services could make up for seasonal iPhone declines. That was a headline that came from Apple Insider. And my immediate thought was, aha, they're saying there's a bit of gamesmanship as far as what Apple is doing. Like, okay, so they know that iPhones are going to slow down, so they'll make sure that they have something cool to release at this point. Which I think is actually more of a psychological, statement on who I am or how I think than anything in that headline. Because then I started to read the article, and that's not what they're saying at all. It was JP Morgan analyst Samik Chatterjee basically saying that he is now doubting the iPhone super cycle. And what's funny is he's not doubting iPhone sales. He's not thinking they're slowing down. He's thinking that investors might be expecting too much from the iPhone super cycle. Despite that, the analyst says that he continues to see modest upside drivers for non-iPhone segments, basing this on two reports. One, I didn't do this story on Mac OS Ken because I missed the subtlety, to be honest. Jamf, who used to be a sponsor of Mac OS Ken, and I think that's part of the reason that I worry about doing stories that talk about them specifically. I missed the subtlety, as I say. Jamf came out with a report on Monday that said that its software is now managing more than 20 million Apple devices for 47,000 customers. My concern was that that was basically reading as a PR piece for Jamf. And I don't want to muddy the waters on what's a news story versus what's, something that I'm doing because somebody's a friend of mine or a past sponsor, let's say. So I chose not to do that story. I mean, it was still, there was plenty of other content. Nah, whatever. Samik Chatterjee has actually gone into those numbers a bit. He thinks that the number that they're talking about now, the 20 million, based on other numbers that he's seen from Jamf, he thinks that that means that 1.4 million devices were added last quarter. He thinks 1.4 million devices were added the quarter before that, 900,000 in the second quarter, and 600,000 in the first quarter. Not only is that continued growth, but it's more than anybody expected. Again, because Cook and Maestri said on the last earnings call, we're through the back to school time. Of course, they did know that the other stuff was coming out. They didn't make it sound like people are done buying these things, but back to school, generally speaking, is the big catalyst for these devices, except we're living in weird times now where people are going to be staying home. And you also had brand new iPads coming out, which we didn't know in the September quarter were going to be coming out, or did we? Had we already heard those announced? I can't remember. I know they were announced long before they came out, the iPad Air I'm talking about. Anyway, he cites recent app growth from Sensor Tower as a sign that services are continuing to build as well. So basically, if iPhones falter, and again, it doesn't sound like he thinks iPhones are going to falter, and not many people, maybe they're not doing as well as people expected, but our expectations were exceptionally high. Go back to the whole thing that, what's his name, keeps talking about, Daniel Ives. He's talking about a super cycle, not like, racing off the line, trying to get to the finish line quickly. He's talking about going and going and going. So even if investors are expecting too much from iPhone, Chatterjee thinks the rest of Apple stuff will surprise to the upside. He has an overweight rating on Apple shares, and he also has a price target of 150. There was one other price target raised, which is kind of crazy because it's still under where Apple is currently. Credit Suisse analyst Matthew Cabral raised his price target on Apple shares from, ooh, I'm not good doing math on the fly, $106, I believe, to 120. He upped his price target by 14 bucks. I think I did that math right. And basically, his doing that is based on iPhone strength. I don't understand how you can see iPhone strength, how you can see everything else and be neutral on Apple and have a price target that's actually lower than where Apple is right now. But if you want to know how that works, talk to Mr. Cabral, because that's what he's got, a neutral rating on Apple shares and a price target of 120. So everybody's back to work, I guess. All the financial analysts. Not necessarily the most thought-provoking stuff, but, the kind of stuff I'll be concentrating on at least for the next day or two, because that right now is the Apple news. And boy, is Apple news more fun to watch than real news right now. Hey, coming up in just a minute, we will talk about changes made to Apple's executive compensation, their bonus package, basically. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, I want to let you know about another show that's going on this week. In a Few Minutes has started back up. Doing a round robin thing this week. We don't have any one person on. Rather, based on a conversation that we actually had last week on this show on New Year's Eve, I had asked people to write in and say what they thought was the second most important Apple story of 2020. The first, of course, being, I say, of course, the first I decided was Apple's announcement of the transition to Apple Silicon. I asked people to write in and say what they thought the second most important story was, and you guys did. It's really fascinating. Almost nobody repeated what they thought the second most important story was. And so far, I'm finding with the podcasters I've talked to, I'm not getting repeats either. Now we got 2 more days, so I can't say exactly how that's going to go. But Adam Christensen yesterday said he thought Apple's stock performance was the second most important story of 2020 for Apple. Talked to Allison Sheridan from NosillaCast earlier today, and she said, well, she didn't say stock performance because I said she said something different. However, if you want to know what her answer was, In a Few Minutes is the name of the show. That will be back out tomorrow. You can catch that here on YouTube, actually, youtube.com/KenRay for people who are listening to this audio podcast. Or for people seeing this on YouTube, you can catch the audio podcast In a Few Minutes, available wherever you get the podcasts. Wherever you get the podcasts, the Ganas, the Amazons, the Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Stores, all the places where there are podcasts. Yeah. Let's talk really quickly about the change to Apple's executive compensation thing. The piece from iMore says environmental goals will now determine bonuses for Apple executives. And I'm not sure why we're saying that exactly, because that is going to be one of the things that's going to determine it. They were working from a piece from Reuters that said, Apple has said in an annual proxy filing that it will be making changes to the cash bonuses for its executives. According to the filing, bonuses will begin to be earned if progress is made towards the company's social and environmental goals. I'm not sure why everybody is concentrating on the environmental thing, because Apple has the environmental thing down. I'm not saying they're perfect on it, but between cap and trade and stuff that they've done with the managed forests and the solar arrays and all of that stuff, they now say, on paper at least, that they are 100% carbon neutral in their operations. And they're pushing the supply chain to be carbon neutral by 2030, which used to be 10 years from now and now is only 9 years from now. They're driving that electric train that way. Not a coal-fired train, not a diesel-powered train. They're driving that maglev train that way. My guess is they're going to be able to make those goals. When they talk about their social goals, I'm curious about that. I don't mean to sound suspicious. Who gets to say? There's a story that was in the information, and the problem is I don't subscribe to the information. So I've been picking up bits and pieces from other stories that people have written, and there's this one story that I have not been able to I haven't really been able to bring myself to talk about it on macOS Ken because it is 100% they said. So the information ran a piece earlier this week that said 10 people who used to work for Apple say that Apple drags its heels when dealing with companies that violate workers' safety rules. There was one company in particular, I can't remember the name of it, that was a supplier in China that was using underage labor. And they got dinged by Apple for that. And yet, when they got audited a few months later, Apple found underage labor there again. And according to these guys and gals, maybe, I don't know, according to these people, it took Apple 3 years to move away from that. The implication being that Apple really doesn't care, that Apple was more concerned about the bottom line than it was the workers' safety. Now, here's the problem I have. I don't know enough about the supply chain. I don't know enough about China. I don't know enough about any of that to say whether that is true or not, right? I mean, if there's one company or if there are two companies that are able to do something and one of them is up to something nefarious, it's going to take you a while to get another company up and running to the point where you can switch your business from them to someone else. Unless what you're supposed to do the next day is say, all right, you know what? We're not making screens anymore, or we're not making batteries anymore until we find someone else. I saw an article recently that said that Apple has suspended business with Wistron because of the riots in India. That's not true. Apple is still doing business with Wistron because Apple still has business that needs to be done with Wistron. They are the ones who are making a certain number of phones, and Apple is still planning to make that certain number of phones. What Apple is doing is leaning on Wistron to knock off all the bad stuff that they're doing, and they have suspended new business because I guess that's how business is done. And it's horrible to think that Apple would keep working with somebody who is employing child labor. You kind of have to believe, hope, trust that from the second they find out about that, they're working either to stop those people from doing that or to get to another place. But you can't turn a ship around on a dime, and you can't turn around a supply chain as big as Apple's in a day. Unless what you're going to say is, right, if we find anybody in our supply chain doing anything wrong, we're going to shut all of that down right then, which means we're not going to be able to sell our equipment, and all those people are also going to lose jobs. So now we circle back to the other thing about their bonuses. Would they get dinged in 2020 because Wistron was mistreating employees in India? Would they get dinged in 2020 because it came out that sometimes it takes Apple longer than other people want it to take to get to a place where they can do the right thing? I don't know how that whole thing works. Maybe it's easier to say, well, they're basing it on the environmental stuff because maybe people think that's the only social thing that Apple has to work on. Remember when people were throwing themselves off Foxconn buildings? People were throwing themselves off Foxconn buildings. And the problem is there was no viable Pegatron to go to at that point. There was no viable Wistron to go to at that point. And so Apple had to keep working, I mean, there's your question. Apple had to keep working with Foxconn, but they also had to lean hard on Foxconn to say, make this better. And there are things that they've done, like their trainings for people who are on the line to actually go and start their own businesses, the education programs, and, hopefully making it so that work conditions are better so that people aren't throwing themselves off buildings anymore. Yeah. It's an interesting thing to look into. I guess what I'm wondering is who does get to say. because Apple can pat itself on the back all day long for all of its environmental initiatives. And they can say all day long that they work for their workers. And I would like to believe that's true. I want to believe that's true, but somebody else has to actually say, because otherwise you might as well just keep writing yourself a check. Maybe we'll hear about that at their virtual shareholders conference. Virtual shareholders conference on the 23rd of February. What stinks is, I'm pretty sure that just means a Zoom conference. I love the idea of it being a virtual conference. And there'd be like a 3D poorly rendered Tim Cook standing up there. Although Ming Chi Kuo says we're getting AR glasses sometime this year. Maybe shareholders will get a package in the mail on the 21st of February with AR glasses. Give them 24 hours to learn how to use them so that they can go to the virtual shareholders conference and just sit there and, stare at their hands through the AR glasses. None of that last part's going to happen. Hey, if you're here in the chat room, please stay in the chat room. I will be by there momentarily. If you're not here in the chat room, I wish you were, because we've decorated it. It's really pretty, and it is also virtual. This is a thing that we do every Monday through Friday, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern. Yeah, we would love it if you would join us. Of course, if you can't, hey, that's cool. We'll still put out the audio podcast just for you. macOS Ken again tomorrow, in a few minutes again tomorrow. macOS Ken live tomorrow afternoon. I will talk to you one or all of those times. Take care. How are you guys and gals? People and other people. Stephen Huxtable says, howdy, everybody. Howdy, Steve. Did I say Steve? I'm sorry, Stephen. Oh, bye, Laura. Or are you saying hello? Hang on. Where are we? Where are we? Brian's talking about the services thing. What's a lot of Ken? No, don't talk about a lot of Ken. No. John says, oh no, Georgia election coverage is in his up next in YouTube when this is done. John, if you need me to stay on all night to save you from it, I can't, because I actually need to watch the Georgia election coverage too. When does a super cycle just become a cycle? Bill? I think I actually mentioned something like that earlier this year, right? Or earlier, like last week. So not earlier this year, because there is no earlier this year. The thing that Daniel Ives keeps talking about, 950 million iPhones out there, 330 something he thinks are in the upgrade window. That's just rolling now, right? I mean, that's just a rolling thing that happens. I don't have an iPhone 5G. I'm not going to get an iPhone 5G this year. I will probably get one at the end of this year, when the next iPhone comes out, iPhone 13 or whatever they call the next iPhone. It's going to have 5G because it's going to have 5G, and, I'll get that at that point. I feel like people are on whatever cycle they're on. I tend to be on a 2-year cycle for upgrading my phone. Other people are on 3. Some people do seriously hold on to their phone for as long as they can possibly hold on to their phone. I think it was the $200 every 2 years for AT&T that finally put me in that place of, I get a new phone every couple of years. Because usually there's enough of a jump that it's worth doing anyway. You notice the difference, even if it wasn't necessarily something you, quote, needed, end quote. So yeah, I'm with you. Same sort of thing, too, is being set up for Macs and iPads with the work from home thing. I think it's going to take a long time for that to be evident. I think it's possible, as a number of analysts have said, that they could be in for tough comparisons this year versus last year. Although if they keep sort of spreading out the Apple Silicon Max, couldn't last longer. There was some story that I saw that I paid very little attention to that said a new iPad Pro is imminent. That could boost sales. That's pretty much what Samik Chatterjee was saying, right? They've got enough other stuff going on right now that even if iPhone sales disappoint, and they're not going to disappoint, they're just not going to necessarily be as gangbusters as everyone's expecting, because everyone is expecting such gangbuster sales. But even if somehow, despite blowing the doors off it, iPhone sales manage to disappoint, nobody is looking for the Mac to come roaring, or nobody is looking for the iPad to come roaring, at least for this last quarter. And it's his argument anyway. Yes, we're just on a cycle. How much does the stock go down when it does? Bill asks. Pass. Oh, stop it, Paul. Sorry. I have no integrity. What are you talking about? John says his sister says that she would really like the news to go back to being boring. Wouldn't that be great? I don't want to become a disengaged citizen. I don't want to become somebody who doesn't pay any attention. But if I could spend a day not worrying about what's emanating from the district, that'd be kind of cool. Webb wonders whether Apple board member Al Gore is pushing the environmental angle on the executive compensation. I don't know. I mean, Tim Cook's they've been about that for years, right? I remember being frustrated in the first couple of years of Mac OS Ken by Greenpeace constantly attacking Apple. Every time Apple would do something to sort of green its workings, to make its workings more environmentally friendly, Greenpeace would come out and say, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about this? And honestly, at the time, I thought it was kind of disingenuous and kind of awful to do. May have worked. I don't think you can say it's all Al Gore. I mean, certainly he's there, right? But, he's one among many. And this really does seem to seriously be a thing for Tim Cook and Lisa Jackson. I mean, the fact that they hired Lisa Jackson, who used to work for the EPA, right? I mean, I guess they could have hired her in the hopes that she would just, be quiet and give them like a green seal. But in fact, that seems to really be part of what they're doing. And that said, they're all rich. It's easy to say, yeah, pin it on the environment, because even if they don't do well in the environment, which they're going to do, they're still loaded. I know people who have a lot of money still want more money. People who have a little money still want more money. Everybody wants more money. But if they miss on something, it's not like, how many cars does Phil Schiller have to sell to make up for it? It's cynical. That's so cynical. Sorry. That's true, Matthew. Matthew says by buying carbon credits or offsets, it doesn't mean they aren't polluting or whatever. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's the system we have. I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, and I remember feeling sort of horrified when I found out that was part of the way that people were achieving carbon neutrality. I feel like Apple makes too much noise about it for it to just be a shell game. Hey, shell. Sorry. Matthew, man, I thought I was cynical. Oh, interesting. There's a 24/7 camera for Starship, really? Is that in case somebody steals it? Sorry, John was saying he'll let me work as far as the, do I need to stay on to keep him from watching the Georgia runoff? Uh, and something just popped up on my screen. Man, do not disturb. Oh, I forgot to set do not disturb, so that's my fault. Something just popped up on my screen and said the polls are closing. You're not going to be able to escape it, John. I'm sorry. Hmm. Similar to the thing about, sorry, where John said he'd like the news to go back to being boring. Paul says he would like the news to go back to being optional. Frank wants a breather. Jesus, we should always get a pardon. I'm sorry for saying that. I feel like we should all get a month off. That should be the next act of Congress, which I guess is kind of what they were trying to do with the lockdown and paying people. But seriously, we should get a month off, like hazard pay for having lived through all of this. And Jeff points out, John, that we're not going to have results today. Yeah. John, is this the one where they're going to try to catch it again with the tower? That's crazy to me. Matthew says, excuse me, doesn't France take a month off every year? Yeah, I want to say that's in August, which is kind of funny because, people from the US think, oh, I'll go in August. And then they get there and they can't get anything or do anything. Oh, well. Right. On all of those happy notes, I'm going to go turn this into an audio podcast and then start working on tomorrow's Mac OS Ken or something. I don't know. I got stuff I have to do, so I'm going to go do that. I will say really quickly, I was talking to Allison Sheridan earlier today, and I got to tell her again that this is my favorite part of the day, what we do for this part. So thank you for being here for it. Right. Going to go make a show and then another show and then one more after that. Have a good night, everybody. John, I want to tell you it's going to be okay. Try not to let it get to you. That's what I'll say. I will also be saying that to myself. Take care.